Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're diving straight into the editorial section today. And the first piece, well, it sets a very serious tone. It analyzes a proposed overhaul of India's largest rural employment guarantee scheme.
That's right. The article's called The Erosion of India's Rural Right to Work. And it outlines how a new bill could, effectively dismantle the democratic core of MG&RGA.
And to really get what's at stake, you have to go back to the Constitution, don't you?
You do. The whole moral weight of this law rests on Article 41, which is one of the directive principles about the right to work.
The directive principles, always a point of debate. I remember Dr. B.R. Ambedkar seeing them as instruments of instruction, sort of a roadmap.
A roadmap for economic democracy, exactly. But then you had others like K.T. Shah, who were much more cynical.
He called them pious wishes, right?
Pious wishes. And the article argues that with this new bill, Shah's pessimism is, unfortunately, looking more and more accurate.
It's a sobering thought, especially when you remember how the original 2005 MG&RGA Act came to be.
It really was a triumph of political negotiation. It wouldn't have happened without the support of the left parties after the 2004 election.
Yeah.
They were the ones who really pushed to ensure it had that deep democratic content.
And that content was, it was simple, but also revolutionary in its own way. It was demand-driven.
That's the key phrase. If you were a rural worker, the state had a legal binding obligation to give you up to 100 days of work.
Universally. And with equal wages for men and women, which was huge, it acted as this vital, non-discriminatory economic floor.
And this is precisely where the new proposed bill, which is called GRAM-G, just rips out the foundation.
How so?
It moves away from being demand-driven. So instead of the law dictating the funding will now be based on, and I'm quoting here, normative financial allocations set by the center.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Say you're in a state that's struggling, and the actual demand for work is way higher than that allocation. What happens then? Does the center have to provide more funds?
No, absolutely not. And that's the core legal maneuver here. The center completely sheds its legal obligation if expenditure goes over that centrally set number.
So for the worker on the ground, it means that even if you desperately need that work, the program can just say,
sorry, the budget ran out. Your right to work is now conditional on a preset budget, not your need.
And there's more. The article also points to a direct assault on the federal structure.
A huge one. The bill tries to saddle the states with 40% of the cost share. That's a massive jump from what they were responsible for before.
It feels like it would force poor states into a corner, either pay more to prop up a failing program or let it collapse.
Exactly. And then you see the class bias. There's a clause in there that prohibits work during the peak agricultural season.
On the surface, that might sound logical. You don't want to take labor away from farms when they need it most.
But the data tells a completely different story. Rural workers, they only turn to MG&RGA during peak season when local farm wages are too low or there's simply no other work available.
So it's a fallback option, a way to have some bargaining power.
It's their only bargaining chip. By removing that fallback, the state effectively crushes the bargaining capacity of these workers. And this hits women's wages disproportionately hard.
The scale of the distress that this scheme was meant to address is it's horrifyingly clear in the statistics the article brings up.
It is. Nearly 1 crore workers were turned away in 2024-25.
And the households that do manage to get work are averaging less than 50 days, not the guaranteed 100.
And when you look at who these people are, Adivasis and scheduled castes making up over 2/3 of the workforce, it becomes so clear this isn't just an economic program.
No, it's a lifeline reflecting deep structural inequality. And as the source argues, that lifeline is being deliberately cut.
That's a crucial perspective. Now let's move from the challenge of rural development to, the colossal challenge of India's industrial and energy future.
Okay, Article 2, Nuclear Energy and the Path to Indian Development. This one connects India's big ambitions directly to its energy supply.
It makes a very compelling case, and it's built around the fundamental link between energy and, human quality of life.
It references Earl Cook's work, which tracks per capita energy consumption. The basic idea is that for a society to reach high human development, its energy needs just explode.
They do, exponentially. And the specific metric used here is the Human Development Index, the HDI. To really join the ranks of developed nations with an HDI above 0.9, India needs. Well, the estimate is around 24,000 terawatt-hours of generation annually.
And that number just throws our current reality into such sharp relief.
It does. We generated only about 1,950 TWH in 2023-24. We are miles and miles away.
And on top of that, we have the decarbonization dilemma. We have to keep growing to lift people out of poverty, but at the same time, we have to replace our fossil fuel energy sources.
This is where you run smack into the limitations of solar and wind. They're vital, of course, but they're intermittent.
Meaning the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow.
Exactly. And the storage needed to handle seasonal variations, say, a weak monsoon season reducing hydropower, is just prohibitively expensive right now.
Plus, India is so densely populated. The sheer amount of land you'd need for that renewable build-out is a huge constraint in itself.
Which brings us to what the article calls the baseload imperative.
The base load. So if you think of the power grid like a complex factory, this is the engine that has to run 247, reliably, affordably, no matter what.
Precisely. It provides that essential stability. And the article argues that the only affordable, non-intermittent, carbon-free source we have to fill that gap is nuclear power.
It's essential for a stable grid that can support mass electrification and industrial growth.
And what's really impressive here is India's indigenous capability. We aren't just buying reactors off the shelf from other countries.
No, we've achieved technological self-reliant across the entire supply chain, from fabricating our own fuel and producing heavy water to manufacturing the equipment.
It's a true strategic national success story. The Nuclear Power Corporation of India has mastered the 700 milliW pressurized heavy water reactors, the PHWRs.
And that technology is the backbone of the whole strategy, right?
It is. We have several operational, more being built. The only thing we really need to import is the uranium itself.
And this national mastery has given the government the confidence to back it politically.
It has, and that's formalized in the Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India Bill, or the Shanti Bill 2025.
A very memorable acronym.
Indeed. And it sets a monumental target, 100 gigawatts of nuclear installed capacity by the middle of the century. The source concludes that reaching that developed nation status requires exactly this kind of bold, technical commitment.
Okay, we've talked massive policy, massive infrastructure. Let's pivot now to the digital future with the opinion section. Article 3, Hype and Hope, the realities of the AI boom.
A big topic. We're talking about $500 billion projected to be spent globally on AI by 2026. The question is this just investor euphoria, a bubble?
The article frames it as a debate between genuine technological progress and speculative enthusiasm.
And it uses a really helpful historical lens, the dot-com parallel.
Right. It makes the point that the dot-com era wasn't really a failure. It was this necessary kind of fever dream that ultimately left us with the internet.
Exactly. It followed a pattern. You have the initial hope, which generates massive hype, and that leads to a necessary make-and-break phase.
So the speculators and the bubble companies might collapse financially.
They do, but the underlying technology, the fiber optic cables, the data centers, it all progresses regardless. The infrastructure gets built.
And the article draws a crucial distinction between the AI we already have and the AI we're speculating about.
A very important one. AI is already everywhere in narrow domains. Your scam filter, your Netflix recommendations. That's all AI.
But the current hype isn't about that. It's all fixated on highly autonomous agents and the big one, artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
Which is still purely theoretical. And we're actually seeing a shift right now where the simple idea of just make the model bigger is starting to fail.
The scaling laws are being challenged.
They are. It turns out AGI isn't going to just magically appear if we throw more and more data at it. It's a harder problem than that.
This all ties back to a useful framework the article mentions. That society typically overestimates the impact of a new technology in the short term, say the next year.
But drastically underestimates it over the long term, like 5 to 10 years out.
And if we look long term, the source predicts the biggest gains won't be in flashy consumer apps.
No, not at all. They'll be in the unseen areas.
Yeah.
Fundamental science, accelerating discoveries in biology, chemistry, drug discovery. That's where the real societal payoff is.
But the risk is still there. We can't forget the historical AI winters.
Right, those periods in the 60s and 70s and again in the 80s and 90s when funding just completely froze because the grand promises of AGI failed to materialize quickly enough.
It really emphasizes the need for sustained long-term investment even when the immediate returns aren't obvious.
We have to see the current hype less as a guarantee of success and more as, essential fuel for a necessary scientific exploration. Many ventures will fail, but the underlying knowledge base will grow.
Let's shift our focus now to the health section. Here we confront a massive and profoundly hidden public health crisis. Article 4, domestic violence as a leading risk factor for chronic illness.
This is a powerful piece. It starts with the tragic case of a woman named Mira. For years, she presented with all these non-specific, painful physical symptoms.
Things like chronic pain, chest tightness, panic attacks.
Yes, and she was repeatedly referred between specialists, cardiology, psychiatry, and just given treatments for her symptoms because the root cause was completely invisible to the system.
And the underlying issue, it turned out, was severe untreated post-traumatic stress disorder.
Stemming from intimate partner violence or IPV, and her story is just so tragically common because the system simply has a blind spot for this kind of chronic trauma.
The article then centers on a paradigm shift from the Global Burden of Disease Study 2023. And the findings are, well, they're staggering.
They really are. The study found that for South Asian women of reproductive age, IPV is a greater risk factor for poor health outcomes. We're talking cardiovascular disease, depression, chronic pain, than many of the traditional heavy hitters.
Greater than high plasma glucose, obesity, smoking, or alcohol use.
Exactly. I mean, that is a tectonic shift in public health understanding. It moves IPV out of being just a social or a legal problem.
And establishes it as a major measurable driver of chronic disease.
And the reason it stays so invisible is that it's an insidious exposure. It's not a single acute event. It accumulates slowly, over years.
And our medical education system is largely failing to catch up.
It is. Students are trained to look for violence in a legal context, forensic medicine, focusing on evidence for a court case.
Instead of integrating an awareness of everyday chronic violence into their primary clinical practice.
The very place where women present over and over again with these non-specific complaints that never seem to get better.
So the significance of reframing this as a public health issue is that it shines a light on this massive invisible group.
Yes. These are not just the women in crisis shelters. They're the vast majority who continue living with abusive partners, showing up at clinics every day with things like diabetes and hypertension.
Diseases that are being fueled by the stress and violence, but the doctors just lack the training to ask the right questions safely, to document it, or to provide any kind of trauma-informed care.
Without that systemic shift, the healthcare system is just stuck in a loop. It keeps treating the symptoms, the heart disease, the panic attacks, while remaining completely blind to the traumatic fuel source that's generating them.
We're going to stay in the health section, but shift to another form of invisibility with Article 5, Beyond the Invisibility Cloak, Counting the Unseen Child.
This piece highlights another vast and vulnerable population that our systems consistently fail to register: children with disabilities.
The analogy of an invisibility cloak is just perfect, isn't it? Despite birth registration being a fundamental human right, these children face a basic challenge in just being counted.
And the consequence of not being counted is a profound data gap, especially in India. Major national surveys, like the National Family Health Survey, often bypass disabled children entirely.
Which means we're missing critical public health data on them. Things like immunization rates, malnutrition status, enrollment in Anganwadi centers.
So you can't manage what you don't measure. You can't allocate resources for a population you haven't even counted.
And this data deficit creates a devastating cascade effect in the real world.
It does. A disability in a child, or even in one of the parents, creates these immense, often insurmountable difficulties in navigating the government systems for essential services: health treatments, school admissions, nutritional support.
It becomes a bureaucratic nightmare.
A nightmare. And while there's some global movement, the Incheon strategy in the Asia-Pacific region is promoting early childhood intervention, many countries still cling to the limited medical model of disability.
Which focuses only on fixing the individual's impairment.
Exactly. It's the wrong lens.
Yeah.
The article argues for the social and rights-based model, which recognizes that the disability is often created by an environment that isn't inclusive. The whole point is that inclusion isn't just about building a ramp. It's about recognizing, counting, and valuing every single person.
Let's move now to the text and context section, and we're returning to the theme of technological sovereignty with Article 6, DHRU V64 and the future of Indian microprocessors.
Right, this is about the launch of a new indigenous chip.
We're talking about DHRU V64. It's a fully indigenous 64-bit dual-core 1 gigahertz microprocessor developed by CDEC. This is a big step under Mi-80's microprocessor development program.
It is, but is crucial to immediately clarify its strategic role. This chip, DHRU V64, It's not designed to compete with the latest consumer CPUs from, say, Intel or Apple.
That's not its purpose.
Not at all. Its value is in high reliability, critical fields, things like telecom base stations, industrial controllers, automotive modules.
And why is that segment so important for India to focus on?
Well, because we rely so heavily on imports for these critical components. Designing our own chip ensures security, no potential backdoors, and it gives us resilience against supply shocks.
So if a global crisis hits, we can still run our own essential infrastructure.
Precisely. And the foundation of this whole strategy is the open source architecture, the Digital India RISC-V program, or DIRV.
For listeners who might be less familiar, why is RISC-V so strategically important compared to proprietary architectures like ARM or by8A6?
It really boils down to control and ecosystem. RISC-V is an open instruction set. Think of it like a publicly available blueprint for the chip's core language. We don't have to pay massive licensing fees.
But it's more than just the money, isn't it?
Oh, much more. We can freely customize and innovate without asking for permission. That's vital for building a broad domestic ecosystem around the technology.
Okay, but the article points out a massive disconnect between this announcement and market readiness. The big manufacturers, the OEMs, they can't actually adopt this chip yet.
Oh, because critical engineering details are just missing.
Like what?
Well, for starters, there are no published benchmarks. We don't have details on the memory, subsystem cache sizes, I/O capabilities. For a customer in a high-reliability field, this data is everything. How can an industrial controller manufacturer trust this chip without knowing its failure rates or its performance per watt?
And it goes even deeper into the supply chain.
It does. Where's the chip being made? What are the fabrication yields? For automotive and telecom, those reliability targets determine the chip's entire operational life cycle. Without those specifics, fully indigenous is just an academic concept.
And the final hurdle is the ecosystem roadmap.
Yeah. When will developer boards ship? Which operating systems are supported? Has it passed security audits? The source argues that India needs to use it in major anchor projects like government telecom networks to de-risk adoption for everyone else.
A powerful challenge for the MELI-ID program. Okay, from microprocessors to mass media. Article 7, Dhurandhar and the Rise of Government Embedded Cinema.
This introduces a really interesting term for a genre of political filmmaking.
Government-embedded filmmaking. It was coined by Peter Maas, originally for films that get special access to the military. But here, the source applies it to cinema that faithfully reproduces the government's ideological narrative.
And it does so subtly enough that the audience might just consume the propaganda without even realizing it.
Let's get into the specifics of the film Dhurandhar. The article says it reinforces Hindu nationalist tropes by linking a union minister in slaughterhouses in UP to a fake currency racket.
Right. It feeds that sentiment that the real enemies are within. It also gives an explicit nod to a future nationalist CM of UP, which is a clear reference to Yogi Adityanath.
So it's not just nationalism, it's partisan.
Deeply partisan. The film lionizes a powerful security figure who is clearly meant to be National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. And it concludes by literally using the Prime Minister's popular, aggressive slogan, Ye Naya Bharat Hain, Gar Main Guske Marta Hain.
But, the article notes that Bollywood has been making jingoistic films about Pakistan since the 90s. So how does Dhurandhar cross the line from just being jingoistic to being government-embedded?
I think the difference is the depth of partisan immersion. Earlier films were about a more generalized nationalism. Dhurandhar incorporates specific recent government policies and actively celebrates current, powerful, named political figures and their slogans.
It's a direct reflection of the current administration's narrative.
A direct reflection. And it presents this monochromatic view of Pakistan, ignoring any complexity. For instance, Karachi's Liari, a setting for crime in the film, is also known internationally as Mini Brazil for its vibrant football culture. You get none of that nuance.
The article calls out the irony of fans who claim this is some kind of cultural counterstrike.
When in reality, it's just the latest and most deeply partisan version of a formula that's existed for decades. It's not a counter-narrative. It's a reproduction of the government's narrative.
Let's transition now into the business section. Article 8 is a major geopolitical story. China's silent breakthrough, the secret EUV prototype project. This has huge implications.
Huge. This is about the global technological Cold War. The significance of EUV, or extreme ultraviolet lithography, just can't be overstated.
These machines are the ultimate bottleneck in advanced manufacturing. They're essential for producing the smallest, most powerful chips for AI and military tech.
And that capability has been a total monopoly held by one company in the Netherlands, ASML.
Until now, perhaps. The breakthrough revealed here is just staggering. Chinese scientists have successfully built an EUV prototype in a high-security lab in Shenzhen.
And they did it through reverse engineering, led by a secretive team of former ASML engineers who were lured back to China.
This sounds less like a corporate project and more like a national mission.
It's described as China's Manhattan Project. The goal is 100% exclusion of the U.S. from its supply chains. The secrecy was so extreme that recruits were given fake IDs.
So this suggests China could achieve semiconductor independence years earlier than anyone expected.
That's the takeaway. But the article is careful to note the challenges. The prototype is operational. It generates EUV light. But it's crude. It's many times larger than ASML's highly refined machines.
So what's the biggest technical hurdle they still face?
It's the precision optics. Generating the light is one thing, but replicating the hyper-precise optical systems, especially the ones supplied by Germany's Carl Zeiss AG, that is immensely difficult. That remains the final choke point.
And their recruitment strategy seems key to bridging this gap.
Absolutely. They aggressively targeted Chinese-born former ASML engineers with massive signing bonuses. It just shows how valuable that embedded institutional knowledge is in this race.
They're aiming for working chips from this prototype by 2028, though 2030 is maybe more realistic. Regardless, this is a fundamental shift in the global balance of tech power.
It is. Now, for our final piece, we wrap up in the Friday Review section, Article 9, a lovely piece on the Nagaswaram tradition and its influence on Carnatic music.
This is a beautiful look at how knowledge flows across artistic disciplines.
It starts with the great Nagaswaram lineage, focusing on the Thiruvis and Mishali brothers. They were true pioneers. S. Subramania Pillai was the first Nagaswaram Vidwan and instrumentalist to receive the prestigious Sangeeta Kalanidhi Award in 1956.
And what's so surprising is that they actually started out as vocalists.
Yes, their guru insisted on it.
Yeah.
They had to learn all the compositions vocally first.
Why was that vocal training considered so essential for someone who's going to play an instrument?
Because it helped them with the incredibly elaborate and complex rendering of ragas and pallavis. The ultimate goal was to achieve a sound so perfect and seamless that it actually resembled human vocal music. The voice is the ultimate benchmark for melodic expression.
And then, fascinatingly, this instrumental tradition influenced the vocal world right back.
It did. The raga alapana, that long improvisational melodic expansion, was the specialty of Nagaswaram players at temple festivals.
They would play for hours.
For hours. And this practice of long-form alapanas essentially set the structure for 19th century Carnatic music concerts. The entire performance tradition's duration and structure were shaped by these instrumentalists.
The article shares a wonderful anecdote about the modern vocalist Sanjay Subramaniam that shows this cross-generational influence.
It's a great story. He recounts a Nagaswaram Vidwan explaining the Hussaini raga to him using just 3 simple notes. Sa pa sa.
And that simple lesson was transformative for him.
Completely. He said he then consciously started to incorporate the Nagaswaram's characteristic longer swoops, those slow, wide sweeping curves of sound, into his own vocal phrasing.
He literally changed his sound by adopting an instrumental technique.
He transformed his soundscape. It's a perfect illustration of how mastery involves this continuous learning across boundaries. The knowledge in one tradition is never isolated. It flows and enriches and redefines the entire art form.
As we conclude this deep dive, consider this final thought. How knowledge, whether it's embedded in a musical tradition, aggressively sourced through espionage, or written into a nation's constitution, is never static. It is a continuous act of adaptation, protection, or redefinition, and it requires constant vigilance to maintain its value.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.